So today I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts about how we can do EGD-related research and some of the, I think, lessons learned from our lab that may be relevant to you. I got started in this line of work, God, more than 10 years ago now, with this product called the Leverage Freedom Chair, which is an off-road, all-terrain wheelchair designed for rural areas of developing countries. And the trick behind the design is that to go fast, you grab down near the pivots of the levers so you can push through a big angle every stroke. And as the going gets tougher, if you need more torque at the wheels to, say, go uphill or go through sand or mud, you can slide your hands up the levers to produce that greater torque. So with this very simple technology, our chair is about 80% faster than a regular wheelchair on the road. It's about 40% more efficient to propel, and then when the going gets tougher, you just slide your hands up the levers and you can produce about 50% more torque at the wheel than you could with a conventional push rim. This product, the Grit Freedom Chair, where you can see this shares the same DNA as our Leverage Freedom Chair, developing world variant, but it's an all-terrain, enabling, go-anywhere type mobility aid that's not a medical product. This is really an enabling, life-enhancing type device. So with this same platform of technology, we were able to start a company, Global Research Innovation Technology, and create two product lines based on that same DNA. I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on what elements I think are required to do successful engineering for global development and research. So the first thing I'm always trying to ask myself is that, are we going after a meritorious problem? And what I mean by that is, are we actually going after a compelling development challenge? I also ask myself, is there an unmet economic opportunity? Is there a way that we could take a solution and scale it through free market mechanisms because users recognize the value in it and want to invest in it? And I think about, do we understand the metrics of performance that must be satisfied in order to create a successful solution? Or are we just qualitatively looking at the problem? Because I think when engineers know what the actual problem is, we're really good at solving it. And then what I try to dovetail with this is the technical merit behind the projects we look at. Can I leverage technical insights to create a solution? Can I leverage an understanding of the physics and the thermodynamics behind the problem to actually see how could we create a solution? And then if we're creating research, I'm always asking myself, must new knowledge be created in order to solve this problem? I think you have to align your value merits behind whatever project you're working on. And what I mean by that is you have to think about who will fund your work and what do they care about. And it may actually be different than what you care about, but maybe you can find that nice shared space where you can both work and mutually benefit. And finally, I think about what is my own value proposition? Do I want to impact lives? Do I want to make money? Do I want to educate students? Do I want to publish research? Could we do all of the above? And I think, once we answer all these questions and we're pretty confident, what we focus on is the technological keystone at the center of this. And what I mean by that is there's often a research problem that we can really sink our teeth into. It's a small subset of the overall problem, but if we create that technological keystone, our partners are well positioned to build the arch of the rest of the solution around it. I'm going to give you some examples of hopefully how we're actually doing this. And the first is about brackish water desalination. So the first thing we tried to understand was kind of the socioeconomic space behind the problem. And it turns out that the most prevalent contaminant in India is salt. 60% of the land area of the country has salty enough water, and it's shown by any color other than blue in this map, salty enough water that you can taste, and that's above the safe drinking threshold set by the World Health Organization. This disproportionately affects people in rural areas. 70% of the population of India gets their drinking water from groundwater. And in rural areas, most rural villages will not have reliable grid access, which makes it difficult to take the salt out of the water. And then we also had to get a sense of what are the economics behind this? And a couple years into the project, we teamed up with Tata Projects, which is an infrastructure company, and that made us start thinking about solar radiance maps, which is what's shown in right here, and how they overlap pretty nicely with the saltiest areas. So where you have the saltiest water, you also have the greatest solar radiance and the greatest energy potential to take the water out. And then the final part of this detective case was thinking about what technologies could work for us. And the two leading candidates were reverse osmosis, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. That's kind of the leading way to do it. and a technology called electrodialysis. And so what we realized by diving into the physics and thermodynamics of this problem was that reverse osmosis requires twice the energy compared to electrodialysis per unit volume of water created for the salinity ranges you find in India. Now, why that was so important as an insight was that when we want to go off-grid, the capital cost of our power system can get cut in half. And then the other big merit is that for these size RO systems currently used in villages, they waste about 60% of the water that come into them, whereas electrodialysis can cut that wastage down to less than 10%. And so the moral of the story here is we took actually 2 years to put together this socioeconomic and technical detective case, and that is what gave us, I would say, the disruptive insight that photovoltaic powered electrodialysis could make a big impact in India. So serendipitously, about a year after we finished this analysis, USAID came out with a program called the DESAL Prize. It was a multinational prize program to make off-grid, renewable powered desalination systems about the same size scale as what you'd want for an Indian village. So we competed in that, we made our first scale system, and we ended up winning that prize. That got us a good foot in the door with USAID, which then led to other field pilots that they funded, first in Jalgaon, India, and then in this past year, we completed a pilot in Cheluru, India, as well as one in Gaza. And so the moral of the story here is that we couldn't just do analysis with this technology. We had to test it in the field to understand the pain points, and I think really understand how could we leverage research to make electrodialysis a viable solution. The next example I want to talk to you about is irrigation. There's about 500 million, with a B, small-scale subsistence farms throughout the developing world. It accounts for about 2.5 billion people, and the highest development intervention you can do for these folks is enabling them to irrigate, because they can grow more and higher value crops, make more money, and get out of poverty. Now the rub is that the conventional way to allow them to irrigate is with flood irrigation, like you see in this picture, where you dig channels and flood water in. Now why that's a problem in a country like India is that already in the next 10 years, India is expected to have its consumption rate of clean water exceed its replenishment rate. So the silver bullet here potentially is drip irrigation. So this is a means of irrigating crops by just dripping out the exact amount of water the crop needs, so you minimize water loss to evaporation and drainage. You can grow a lot more crops than rain-fed irrigation, and you can cut your water consumption by about 60% compared to regular flood irrigation. So to wrap up, the main theme I want to really come through today is I think a lot of our success has come through aligning value propositions where we can do science, we can chase after a meritorious economic and business opportunity, and also chase after some real-world impact.